upon the Jewish people to destroy them. And Og did as well. So those were, in reality, wars of self-defense that turned into wars of conquest because they occupied the lands of Sichon and Og. Just as in our situation here in Israel, the 1967 war was a war of defense, which turned into a war that took territory and expanded the borders and changed the equation here in at least a semi-permanent fashion. So Balak sees what they did to the Amori, so he realizes that war is not going to do it for him, because Sichon and Og were the major powers, and if the Jewish people were able to overcome them and to really make a complete victory against them and inherit their territory, so he realizes that Moab is a relatively smaller area, weaker. In fact, Moab had an alliance, was relying on Sichon to protect them. So he realizes that he's not going to be able to do it. So he's faced, the Medrash says, with a number of choices. One choice is to do nothing. Now, it takes a great deal of patience and perseverance and faith to do nothing, because all leaders by nature, by the fact that they are leaders, have to do something. Because im kain lo mazeh anochi, then what do you need them for? But his wisest choice would have been to do nothing, because the Rabbanu Shalom had told Moshe not to be aggressive against Moab. There are relatives, they're children of Lot. Abraham was the uncle of Lot. So, al totzaras Moab, al tizkor bo milchoma.
Balak knew this? Balak knew this?
I can't testify, but I think it's obvious that he knew it. That's why he hires Bilam. But the Jewish people had made no threats against him. He himself says, "Hu yoshev mimuli," they're encamped near me. But they make no threatening moves. They're not doing anything. So one thing he could have done is nothing. A second thing he could have done is try and negotiate. Medrash points out all of these options, because all of these options are always present in every generation regarding every type of possible conflict. So he could have negotiated with Moshe. Could have found out that the Jewish people maybe only want to go through his territory. They don't want to occupy his territory. They'll make him the same offer that they made to Edom. So that was the second choice that he had. He had a choice to go to war, so we mentioned that that choice didn't appeal to him, because he saw that that choice would lead to probable disaster. So he takes a different tack completely. He's going to undermine the Jewish people. He's going to destroy them from the inside, which is one of the great tactics which exists in all conflicts, is that you don't have to always defeat the enemy from the outside. And many times it's much more effective and much more certain to defeat the enemy from the inside. The enemy will defeat itself. and the history of humanity from the time of the Trojan War until today is that isn't a very, very effective technique. That's a tactic that works. You undermine the national faith of the people. You make the people feel that their leadership is of no value. You sap their strength. So therefore, they cannot withstand you. I mean, that's what happened to France in 1940, where the German army overran it in 6 weeks, is because they were defeated from the inside. They came from 2-3 decades of terrible internal strife. So no one thought of what was good for France. Everybody thought was good for themselves. So the French army, which was the largest army and the best equipped army, much more better equipped than the Germans, it just fell apart because from inside they were eaten apart. Defeatist attitude. So how is he going to do that? So he resorts to Bilam. Now, Bilam is a very cunning person who has greatness within him. We all know the Medrash that Rashi quotes, that the Yisrael will come to Moshe. Jewish people didn't have another Moshe, but the Umas Olam did. And that was Bilam. So it doesn't mean that Bilam was the same tzaddik that Moshe was, or that Bilam had the same powers of prophecy. But it means that Bilam was a worthy opponent. Bilam was someone who could do it. And the Medrash teaches us that Bilam was in on the enslavement of the Jewish people in Egypt. The Gemara says, Shlosha oyu be'etzah. Paro consulted with 3 people about whether or not he should attempt to enslave the Jewish people, what he should do with the Jewish question, what to do about it. So he consulted with Yisro and Bilam and Iyov. Those are the 3 that the Gemara mentions. So the Gemara says Yisro told him to leave the Jewish people alone. They are special people. You leave them alone. And Paro didn't like to hear that, so Yisro had to flee. But Yisro was rewarded. Right? His daughter married Moshe Rabbeinu, and Yisro himself, his descendants came to Eretz Yisrael. We read in the book of Shoftim, in the book of Yoshua, Bnei Chovav, Ruel, they were all in Eretz Yisrael, lived amongst the Jews. The difference of opinion whether they had a din of Ger Tosha, the Ger Tzedek, or whether they weren't Gerim at all. But in any event, he became part of the Jewish people in one way or another. And we have a whole parsha in the Torah that he was the catalyst for it, with the assignment of judges, etc. Bilam said, enslave them. They won't be able to take it. Bilam was not interested only in their physical demise, but he was interested in their spiritual demise. He said, people that are slaves for centuries, they're not going to be able to do anything later. It cannot be that after being enslaved for 210 years, that within 40 days they're going to say Nasiv and Ishma. That's too big a jump. And therefore they're destroyed. And you have a chance to destroy them permanently. We all see throughout the world how difficult it is for groups and societies to recover from being slaves. Sometimes it takes centuries, sometimes it never happens. It's a mindset. It's a dependency that's created. So Bilam said, put him in slavery. And Paro accepted his advice. Now when Bilam's advice is accepted, he gets money. Bilam does not operate free. It's true in the world generally that there's no free lunch. And all of the pious people that want to make revolutions and social change and equality, they live pretty well. They don't, they're not living in the inner city on the west side of Chicago. They've got a nice mansion in Hyde Park. So that was the second one. The third one the Gemara mentions is iyov. Now, iyov is a difficult figure for us to know anything about. The Gemara itself has a hard time identifying him. The Gemara says that some say he lived at the time of Avram Avinu. Some say he lived here at the time of Mitzrayim. And some say he lived later. Some say there was no such person. And that the whole story of iyov is meant to be an allegory so that we can discuss the age-old problem of tzaddik v'ralo, rosha v'tovlo, why the world is the way it is, and that therefore in Kisvei HaKodesh, so the Gemara says that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote iyov. The book of iyov is composed by Moshe Rabbeinu. And therefore he's not talking about a real person, but he's talking about a situation where you have righteous people, a righteous person such as iyov, that terrible things happen. And the Lord, so to speak, acquiesces to it, allows it to happen. So what do we do about that? So it's interesting that in Torah, the question is allowed. In other religions, it's not allowed. But we allow questions, even when we don't have answers. And the book of Iyov is an example. So anyway, this medrash holds that Iyov was present by Paro, and Iyov sheshosak, Iyov was quiet. He didn't give an opinion. Yisro said no. Bilam said yes. And Iyov abstained. So the Gemara says, Nidon be Yisurim. Therefore, later on, he had pain and problems. So there's a famous idea here. Why did he have pain and problems? Because if one abstains on basic questions, that means that one is not concerned about the other person at all. It has nothing to do with me. I don't care. You don't care, so you don't be Yisurim, right? You yourself will pay a price for such an attitude. So in any event, we see that Balak knows from the beginning that Bilam is out to get the Jewish people. And he knows that he is cunning. And he knows that Bilam will figure out a way to destroy the Jewish people from the inside and not from the outside. From the outside, he can't do anything to them. He saw what happened to the Amori. He can't, there's nothing Balak can do. But if Bilam, he knows Bilam is subversive. He is able to do it from the inside, and therefore that's why he hires him. And therefore the entire narrative of the Parsha begins that way, so that we get the background of how Bilam comes into the matter and what bothered Balak and what he attempted to do.